So I want you to just take a second and imagine being 21 years old.
Yep.
You're 21, and you're surviving on an allowance of literally just 7 pounds a week.
Which is just, I mean, incomprehensible today.
Right. Completely incomprehensible. And you're navigating all these razor-sharp complexities of your own identity, dealing with racism and, just trying to figure out your place in a world that really hasn't given you much of a head start at all.
It's a heavy burden for anyone, let alone a kid.
Exactly. But then simultaneously, whenever you step into a boxing ring, the entire global sports media is heralding you as like the most terrifying, destructive force in the heavyweight division.
Yeah.
You were this prodigy, drawing these breathless, honestly, almost reckless comparisons to a young Muhammad Ali and a prime George Foreman.
It's a psychological tightrope, really. I mean, you have this immense, just suffocating pressure of those historical shadows bearing down on you, colliding with the very grounded, very harsh reality of a humble, bare bones upbringing. Like, that dichotomy alone would fracture most young athletes before they even threw a single punch.
And yet, Moses Itauma seems completely unfazed by it.
Totally unfazed.
So if you're watching the heavyweight division right now, you're essentially staring at a waiting room of legends in their late 30s and early 40s, right?
Yeah, it's an aging roster.
What you're desperately looking for is that exact inflection point, like that sudden, violent moment where the tectonic plates of the sport shift and the old guard is finally put on notice.
The changing of the guard.
Exactly. And that is the mission for today's Deep Dives. We are unpacking the meteoric rise of this British heavyweight because we might actually be watching that exact regime change happen in real time. So the question is he genuinely the heir apparent, or, is this just another classic boxing hype train headed for the cliff edge?
Right. And to figure out if the foundation actually matches the facade here, we really have to look past just the highlight reels.
Yeah, we need the data.
Exactly. So we're pulling apart Cal Sajad's brilliant, super granular fight analysis for BBC Sport, and we're also dissecting Donald McRae's really intimate profile on Itauma's roots and identity.
That McRae piece is fascinating.
It really is. And perhaps most tellingly, we're tapping into the sprawling real-time fan forums where the diehard boxing community is breaking down his biomechanics and psychology literally frame by frame.
Which is where things get really wild.
Yeah.
So let's put you in the room. You are Moses Itauma. And last week, at the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester, you didn't just win a fight. You sent a massive shockwave through the entire sport.
Yeah, that atmosphere is something else.
16,000 fans, absolute bedlam in the arena. He makes his ring walk with the British rapper Meek stay, so the energy's just at a fever pitch, right?
Oh, yeah.
And waiting for him in the center of the ring is Jermaine Franklin. And look, let's be really clear about Franklin here.
He is not a tomato can.
Not at all. He took Anthony Joshua 12 full rounds. He took Dillian White 12 rounds in a fight that, honestly, a lot of people thought he actually won.
Yeah, there's a strong argument for that.
He's a 32-year-old veteran who had never been stopped in 27 professional bouts. Never.
Right. Franklin is he's the classic durability test.
Yeah.
He's the wall you throw a prospect against just to see if they shatter. Because he has the craftiness to smother punches, he has the inside game to frustrate a younger fighter, and a chin that had, until last week anyway, absorbed the absolute best concussive force the British heavyweight scene had to offer.
But Itauma didn't just break the wall. I mean, he vaporized it. The narrative of this fight is honestly chilling.
He was clinical.
So, Itauma drops Franklin in the third round.
Yeah.
And Franklin climbs back up, relying on that veteran survivor instinct.
Right, he's been there before.
Exactly. But then, in the fifth round, Itauma lands this devastating, mathematically perfect right uppercut. And Franklin is just out cold.
Yeah, completely severed from consciousness.
Right. It wasn't a referee stoppage because Franklin was taking too many jabs or whatever. It was a complete lights-out knockout.
Which really forces us to look at the tactical anatomy of that knockout, because Franklin made a really critical biological error in his preparation for this fight.
Oh, the weight.
The weight, yes. He came into the ring at 258.5 pounds.
Which is a career heaviest for him. Like
Right.
25 pounds heavier than when he fought AJ, right?
Exactly.
Watching the fight, I couldn't help but think of it like an RPG. It's like a video game boss who spaced his character entirely into heavy armor, hoping to just lean on and bully the younger, smaller opponent, but completely forgot to put a single point into evasion or speed.
Haha, that's actually a perfect analogy,
Yeah.
because the biomechanics of that weight gain were catastrophic against someone like Itauma.
How so?
Well, when you pack on 25 pounds of non-functional mass, your oxygen demand just skyrockets. And your lateral movement, your ability to pivot off the center line, it basically evaporates. So Franklin thought he could use that mass to clinch and just drain the 21-year-old's legs.
Lean on him, make him tired.
Exactly. But against a fighter with blinding hand speed and really elite footwork, Franklin essentially just turned himself into a heavy bag with a pulse.
And heavy bag doesn't move its head.
Exactly. The cruel reality of anatomy is that your chin does not gain muscle. The vagus nerve, your brainstem, they don't get stronger just because you weigh 260 pounds instead of 240.
So the extra weight did nothing to protect him.
Nothing. The extra mass didn't absorb the shock of that uppercut. It literally just anchored his feet to the canvas so he couldn't roll with the punch.
Wow. And, the visceral reaction on the boxing forums was unbelievable. Like, diehards were describing it as a Mortal Kombat fatality.
I saw that, yeah.
One guy noted Franklin looked like he had a halo of cartoon birds flying around his head when he went down.
It's graphic, but it's accurate.
Someone else called it an instant early onset dementia kind of punch, which is, sure, graphic. But when you look at the alternate angle that Cal Sajat highlighted in his BBC piece, the sheer kinetic transfer of that shot, you realize you're watching a 21-year-old generate force that seasoned veterans spend a decade trying to find.
And you watch a 21-year-old deliver that kind of violence to a 260-pound man, and the most chilling part isn't even the punch itself.
What is it?
It's that he just calmly pivots and walks away. That icy, methodical detachment, it doesn't happen by accident. Which brings us to the mechanics of how he's actually doing this.
Right, because it wasn't a wild looping Hail Mary punch.
Not at all. Between rounds, the BBC cameras caught his trainer, Ben Davison, giving him one incredibly telling instruction. He said, "It's a breakdown job."
Oh, I love that phrase, a breakdown job, because it implies, like, architecture.
Yes.
It implies he was looking at Franklin's defense like a structural engineer looking for a stress fracture.
Exactly. Most heavyweights with Itauma's raw power, they fall in love with it. They headhunt.
Right, they load up on the right hand and just leave their feet behind.
Exactly. But Itauma was feinting, he was slipping, dipping his shoulder. I mean, he's 6'4.5", weighing 242 pounds, but he navigates the canvas with the center of gravity of a middleweight.
Which is insane.
It really is. Maintaining a middleweight center of gravity at 242 pounds requires an elite understanding of rotational mass. Like, notice his footwork. He doesn't cross his feet.
Right, he glides.
He glides, keeping his base wide enough to absorb counters but light enough to spring forward instantly. He established this punishing, piston-like jab.
And he didn't just push the jab like a lot of heavyweights do just to measure distance, right?
No, he rotated his hip slightly off the center line with every single jab, turning what is usually a rangefinder into a genuinely concussive weapon.
Wow.
That jab blinded Franklin, lifted his guard, and basically exposed the exact alley he needed for that final uppercut.
Which feeds directly into, I think, the most heated debate tearing through the fan community right now, which is the hand speed.
Oh, the hand speed debate.
Yeah. Fans are genuinely debating if Moses Itauma has the fastest hands in the history of the heavyweight division.
Which is a huge claim.
It's massive. They are throwing his name into the ring with Michael Dokes, Floyd Patterson, and Muhammad Ali. And honestly, I have to hit the brakes on this. That is a monstrous, almost sacrilegious claim to make about a kid who has had 14 fights.
It is early, yeah.
I mean, Dokes threw combinations that literally looked like they were sped up on tape. Patterson's gazelle hook was an absolute blur. So I guess my question for you is, how does Itauma's speed actually map onto the ghosts of the division?
Well, the visual data certainly supports the hype, right?
Yeah.
His flurries are a blur.
Yeah, they are.
But we have to separate the raw physical attribute of speed from the contextual application of speed.
Okay, unpack that.
So Michael Dokes had phenomenal hand speed, but he often smothered his own work by rushing in too close. Patterson had blistering speed, but he left himself open to the counterhook.
Which Sonny Liston brutally exploited, right?
Exactly. Ali, of course, is the gold standard, but Ali's speed was built on firing from a low guard, flicking shots from the waist, and really relying on his unparalleled upper body reflexes to avoid the return fire.
Right. Ali's speed was inherently tied to his evasion, whereas Itauma's speed is different. He's throwing these blistering combinations from a really disciplined, high guard shell.
Precisely. Itauma is snapping his punches with torque while maintaining defensive integrity, which is rare.
Very rare.
However, we have to remember, applying blistering hand speed against a static, exhausted, overweight target like Franklin is a very different kinetic equation than deploying that same speed against a masterful, elusive champion in the championship rounds.
Right, against someone who's actually firing back.
Exactly. The historical greats proved their speed when their lungs were burning and their opponents were actively trying to take their heads off. Itauma has the physical tool, clearly, but he hasn't yet had to use it under ultimate duress.
And that context is everything when we look at his developmental path, isn't it?
Completely.
Because looking like a world beater at 21 against a stationary gatekeeper, I mean, that gets you the headlines. It gets you the walkout with Meeks as the co-op arena. But navigating the treacherous waters to actual legendary status, that requires a very specific map. And in British boxing, the absolute unavoidable benchmark for any rising heavyweight is Anthony Joshua.
Oh, it's the mandatory comparison.
Always.
If we look at the timeline, the juxtaposition is really fascinating. Let's look at his 14th professional fight. Anthony Joshua, at that same stage, was fighting Gary Cornish.
Oh, I remember that era. 2015, right?
Yeah, he demolished Cornish in the first round and was already selling out the O2 Arena in London.
The AJ hype back then was like an industrial machine. But fans on the forums are pointing out a pretty glaring difference in the actual boxing itself.
Oh, definitely.
Because early AJ was heavily muscled, relatively stiff, and entirely reliant on that crushing 1-2 combination. He was basically a bruiser.
A very effective bruiser, but yes.
Right. But Itauma, at the exact same 14-fight milestone, he looks vastly more coordinated. He has head movement, inside fighting skills, and defensive nuances that Joshua really didn't develop until much, much later in his career.
That's true.
Plus, Gary Cornish was a domestic-level fighter. Jermaine Franklin is a fringe world-level gatekeeper. So Itauma is arguably fighting a much higher caliber of opponent right now.
He is. But the fan forums also astutely point out the massive structural advantage that Joshua had, which was an Olympic gold medal.
Ah, right. The amateur pedigree.
Exactly. That amateur pedigree is an accelerator. It means Joshua spent years traveling the globe, facing incredibly diverse, elite amateur styles. He saw Cuban slickness, Eastern European rhythm, American pressure.
Before he even took his headgear off.
Yes. Whereas Itauma is learning on the job in the professional ranks.
Which is risky.
Very. That makes his current polish breathtaking, but it also means he lacks that deep international amateur reservoir to draw from if he suddenly encounters a weird style he hasn't seen before.
But, you know, the fans aren't just looking at AJ. They're digging really deep into the archives. I actually saw a thread where fans were directly quoting the ringside media from 1964.
Oh, the Liston fight.
Yes. Right before a 22-year-old Cassius Clay fought the supposedly invincible Sonny Liston. I mean, 43 out of 46 sports writers picked Liston to just annihilate the kid.
It was considered a foregone conclusion.
Right, and one reporter famously wrote, "The only thing at which Clay can beat Liston is reading the dictionary." The fans are using this historical echo to say, look, we've seen this script before. A prodigious, lightning-fast kid in his early 20s can absolutely dismantle an older, terrifying champion.
The Ali comparison definitely focuses on the disruption of the old guard by youthful speed. But, you know, the other comparison fans are making might be even more apt regarding Itauma's specific style in the ring.
What's that?
They are calling him an 80% reincarnation of George Foreman.
80% Foreman. That's a chilling thought for the rest of the division.
It really is. It speaks to the economy of his violence.
The economy of it.
Yeah, like Foreman didn't waste energy bouncing around the ring. He walked opponents down, he cut off the ring, and he delivered blunt force trauma with just terrifying composure. Itauma has that same icy demeanor. He doesn't look like he's trying hard to hurt you. He just throws a punch with perfect leverage and people just fall apart.
Okay, I'm buying the hype. The speed of Patterson, the composure of Foreman, the early career momentum of Joshua, it sounds unstoppable. But let's pump the brakes and look at the gaping holes in the resume. Because right now, we are essentially dealing with theoretical armor. What happens when we actually test it? Let's talk about the biggest, darkest unknown in heavyweight boxing. The chin.
Oh, the great equalizer. The heavyweight division is literally littered with the shattered careers of phenomenal athletes who looked like Greek gods, right up until a 250-pound man hit them flush on the jaw.
And their central nervous system simply Reboot it.
Exactly. You cannot train a chin. I mean, you can build up your neck muscles, you can drill defensive rolling, but ultimately the ability to absorb concussive trauma without losing consciousness, it's a genetic lottery ticket.
And you only find out if you hold the winning ticket under the stadium lights.
Precisely. Now, Carl Sajad at the BBC did note in his analysis that Franklin landed a pretty solid right hand in the 4th round.
Yeah, I saw that. And what was Itauma's reaction? He just smiled.
He did. But let's be honest here, Jermaine Franklin is not Zile Zhang.
No.
He's not Daniel Dubois. He doesn't carry that generational one-punch deletion power.
Right. So if Itauma takes a flesh 260-pound cross from a true knockout artist, do we actually know if his legs will hold up?
We have absolutely no idea, and that connects directly to the second massive void in his resume, which is the engine, his stamina.
Because he's a knockout artist.
Right, 12 stoppages and 14 fights. He has literally never seen the 7th round.
Wow.
He has never been dragged into the deep waters where the lactic acid is searing your muscles and your lungs are just begging for oxygen.
Because the physiological demands of round 2 are entirely different from round 10.
Exactly. The anaerobic systems you rely on for early knockouts, they burn out. In the championship rounds, you rely on oxidative capacity.
And mental fortitude.
Exactly. When your arms weigh 50 pounds each and you're just taking a grueling body shot, do you still have the reflex speed to slip a jab? Does your footwork get sloppy?
To drop your hands.
Right. We haven't seen Moses Itauma exhausted yet. We don't know what he looks like when he's tired.
Which puts his promoter, Frank Warren, in an incredibly precarious position, doesn't it? Because Warren has been publicly floating the idea of getting Itauma a world title shot this year.
Yeah, I saw that.
Is that dangerously premature? I mean, you have the classic matchmaking dilemma here. Do you slow walk him? Do you feed him durable, negative fighters who will just shell up and survive, literally forcing him to go 10 rounds just so he can experience what round 10 feels like?
It's tricky because slow walking builds the foundation, but fans despise it.
They view it as stalling.
Exactly. The alternative is throwing him straight into the deep end because, well, he's clearly outgrown the shallow water. If he's treating a guy like Franklin like a heavy bag, maybe he is ready for the elite tier.
But the risk.
The risk of rushing a 21-year-old is catastrophic. If you put him in with a seasoned champion who drags him into the 12th round, drowns him in clinches, exposes his chin, and hands him a brutal beating, you don't just lose a fight, you permanently shatter a young man's confidence. You alter his career trajectory forever.
But, you know, maybe that psychological fragility isn't even there with him.
Why do you say that?
Well, when you look at where he came from, you start to realize his mental foundation is built on bedrock, not hype.
Oh, the background.
Yeah, Donald McRae's profile on him is stunning. It completely shifts the lens from the violent boxer to the quiet human being. There's a quote in there that just stops you. He says, "I'm not a superhero. I'm just a boxer."
It's profound in its simplicity, really.
Right.
When McRae unpacks Itauma's upbringing, navigating the insidious nature of racism, struggling to define his identity, and surviving on an incomprehensible 7 pounds a week, you understand why he isn't intoxicated by his own press clippings.
7 pounds a week. I want to just pause on that. Think about the relentless, grinding discipline it takes to merely exist on that, let alone fuel an elite heavyweight frame and train twice a day.
It's unbelievable.
When you've looked actual poverty in the face like that, the pressure of a boxing match probably feels like a vacation.
It forges an entirely different kind of armor. A fighter motivated by fame can be broken when the crowd turns on him. A fighter motivated by Instagram followers crumbles when the hype fades. But someone who has fought for basic survival steps into the ring with a clinical, unshakable reality.
The glitz of the co-op live arena doesn't blind him because he knows exactly what the dark looks like.
Exactly. And it perfectly explains the phenomenon fans are calling the anti-diva.
Yes. I saw a huge thread discussing his recent appearance on the Steve Bunce 5 Live podcast. Listeners were absolutely floored by him.
They expected a brash, arrogant kid high on his own supply.
Exactly. But instead, they heard a highly intelligent, deeply pragmatic, and honestly just thoughtfully quiet young man. The contrast is staggering.
Because we are currently slogging through a boxing era that is heavily polluted by influencer culture.
Oh, completely.
It's defined by manufactured social media beefs, YouTube call-outs, performative trash talk, and fighters flashing diamond watches before they've even won a regional belt.
And right in the middle of that absolute circus, you have Moses Itauma operating like a monk with knockout power.
A monk with knockout power.
Right. And psychologically, that makes him terrifying.
Yeah.
Like when a loud, brash fighter knocks someone out, it's the expected theatrical climax. But when a guy who speaks softly, avoids the spotlight, and shows zero ego steps between the ropes and delivers a Mortal Kombat fatality.
It signals a cold, predatory detachment.
Exactly. It makes him magnetically compelling to watch. You just can't help but root for the guy who lets his left hook do literally all the talking.
So we have established the physiological anomalies, the psychological grounding, and the glaring, untested questions, which leads us to the crucible, the roadmap to the heavyweight crown.
Right.
Specifically what the boxing world is calling the Usyk question.
Alexander Usyk, the unified champion, the maestro.
Yes.
Itauma actually issued a call-out, but true to form, it was the most polite call-out in boxing history. He essentially said, I want him, but I will sit and respectfully wait my turn.
Very on brand.
But the fans are not waiting. The forums are an absolute war zone over a hypothetical Usyk-Itauma matchup.
It really is the ultimate stylistic clash. On one side, you have fans arguing that pitting a 21-year-old against a 40-year-old Usyk is bordering on matchmaking malpractice.
Yeah, they think it's way too soon.
Right. Usyk has hundreds of elite amateur bouts, an Olympic gold medal, a historic undisputed run at cruiserweight, and an undisputed run at heavyweight.
He is a supercomputer in the ring.
Exactly. The argument is that Usyk would drown Itauma in feints, control the distance with his footwork, constantly spin him off balance, and just completely expose Itauma's lack of championship round experience.
It's the classic levels to this game argument, but the counter-argument is pure, brutal physics. Because the other side of the fan base argues that 40 years old is still 40 years old.
Father Time is undefeated.
Right. They point out that Usyk relies on constant twitch reflex movement against a 21-year-old with anomalous hand speed, the seemingly limitless aerobic capacity of youth, and that Foreman-esque concussive power.
They argue Usyk simply couldn't keep away for 12 rounds.
Yes, they literally believe Itauma would physically overwhelm the supercomputer and force an early, violent retirement.
It's the aging, brilliant matador versus the terrifying, unbridled bull. And historically, the matador usually wins right up until the exact night he suddenly ages overnight and gets gored.
Exactly.
But practically speaking, Usyk is locked into a pretty tight schedule of mandatory defenses and rematches right now, and Itauma's team has slated his return for July.
Right. So if we remove Usyk from the immediate equation, who are the actual stepping stones?
Well, the community and the experts have a very tight shortlist, and honestly, it's full of landmines. The name that keeps surfacing everywhere is Filip Hrgović.
Oh, Hrgović.
Yeah, Hrgović is a nightmare for a developing prospect. He possesses an iron chin, heavy, thudding hands, and a vast amateur pedigree. He is a grim, grueling night's work.
He would absolutely drag Itauma into the later rounds and force him to answer those stamina questions we were talking about.
Definitely. But Hrgović is currently tied up with a fight against Dave Allen, which likely removes him from the July sweepstakes.
Okay, so if not Hrgović, what about Zalai Big Bang Zhang? You want to test the chin. Put him in with the 280-pound southpaw who hits like an absolute freight train.
That would be explosive. Or Joseph Parker.
Oh, Parker's on this unbelievable career resurgence right now.
He really is. He has immense experience, an incredibly high ring IQ, and a granite chin. Parker is the ultimate gatekeeper to the world title tier right now. He would be a phenomenal litmus test for Itauma's tactical maturity.
But we also have to look closer to home, right? Because British domestic clashes are often just as lucrative and high stakes as world title eliminators. Kal Sejad actually floated Lawrence Oakley.
Oakley is a stylistic spoiler.
Very awkward.
He has this grappling, heavy, suffocating style. He ruins the rhythm of fluid combination punchers. So fighting Oakley isn't just a physical test, it's a psychological test of your patience. Can you fight on the inside without getting smothered and completely frustrated?
And then there's Daniel Dubois, a true thudding power puncher who would instantly test whether Itauma's chin is made of granite or glass.
And there's one more fascinating domestic name that really highlights the complex political web of boxing gyms, Fabio Wardley.
Right.
He holds the WBO championship belt. On paper, he is the perfect target. But both Wardley and Itauma are trained by Ben Davison.
Oh, the trainer conflict.
Right. In the intricate ecosystem of boxing, a trainer will rarely, if ever, put two of his own stablemates against each other. It fractures the loyalty of the gym and creates an untenable conflict of interest.
So the WBO route via Wardley is essentially blocked by friendly fire.
Basically, yes.
Which means his management has to thread an impossibly tiny needle here. They need an opponent dangerous enough to satisfy their rabid fan base, but not a stylistic nightmare that derails a multi-million-pound hype train before it even leaves the station.
It is a high-stakes game of chess played with 240-pound pieces.
Beautifully put. So when we step back and look at the entire canvas we've unrolled today, we started with a quiet kid surviving on 7 pounds a week, battling the ghosts of racism and identity. Fast forward, and that same kid is 21 years old, gliding across the canvas of the co-op arena, dropping highly durable veterans with the detached precision of a surgeon. I mean, he's carrying the terrifying speed of Patterson and the blunt force trauma of Foreman, all while behaving like the most grounded, humble guy in the room. It's a completely intoxicating narrative.
It is a promoter's absolute dream. But as analysts, we must remain tethered to the reality of the sport.
Sure.
The visuals are mesmerizing, absolutely. But the ultimate crucible remains uncrossed. He has not felt the concussive shockwave of a generational puncher landing flush on his jaw, and he has not had to navigate the suffocating, lactic acid-drenched exhaustion of the 12th round.
Those monsters are still waiting for him in the dark.
They are.
And that brings us to the thought I want to leave you with. Because we love the certainty of data, right? We love the BBC fight breakdowns and the punch stats and the analytics, but boxing is profoundly human, and it is governed by time. When a 21-year-old anomaly enters a division entirely ruled by kings in their late 30s, history demands an answer.
It always does.
Does the old guard use their immense hard-won wisdom to smoothly pass the torch when they are good and ready? Or are we standing on the precipice of a sudden violent hostile takeover? Keep your eyes on the ring this July. We might just find out if the regime change has already begun.